The honourable member for Langley Aldergrove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm up again. So this time on a follow-up to a question they had put to the Liberal minister. This is on May 3rd in question period. I asked a question about the failed drug legalization pilot project in British Columbia. So that project was a joint initiative of the federal Liberal government and the provincial NDP government, basically to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of hard drugs for personal use. Now, the thinking was that if we treat drug addiction as a health issue rather than a criminal issue, then we will destigmatize drug use and in that way encourage addicts to seek medical treatment. Now, that sounded good in theory, but 1 year into this 3-year pilot project, it was clear that it was going to fail. It was a failed experiment. 2,500 toxic deaths in the first year of the pilot project, up 7% from the previous year, and crime and chaos on the streets. We all heard examples, MPs right across the province, and I heard too in Langley, citizens worried that they were seeing people injecting drugs in front of an elementary school, people discarding used needles in playgrounds, and people smoking crack at bus stops and on transit. Other communities across British Columbia had similar experiences, none as stark as in the downtown east side, where chaos had become widespread. British Columbians were unhappy. The provincial NDP government realized they needed to do something, and in fact, they did try. They introduced a provincial bill called the Restricting Consumption of Illegal Substances Act, which would put restrictions on use of drugs, consumption of drugs in open places, in playgrounds, schools, etc. Now, that made sense to common sense citizens, but there was an organization called the Harm Reduction Nurses Association that took issue with it. They took this to court, and surprisingly, at least surprisingly to me, they were able to convince the judge to issue a temporary injunction preventing the government from the provincial government from bringing this law into effect. Now, the argument that convinced the judge was that it is more dangerous to be using for a drug user to be using alone in a private place, at home presumably, than it is in the public eye. And I don't argue with that. I don't know if there's evidence to back that up. But this is what convinced the judge. And he was convinced that this was a violation of drug users' Section 7 charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. So I was surprised by that. So the provincial government realized that they had lost this battle. And so instead they went to the federal government and asked for an amendment to the exemption order to effectively do the same as their provincial legislation was going to do. So I asked my question in that context. Was the government going to put an end to this disastrous failed drug use experiment? And what I got, unfortunately, was a nonsensical answer from the minister who said that the Conservatives weren't interested in protecting the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I don't know where that came from. But I thought it was very surprising, coming from a minister whose government's failed plan for drug use basically undermined the Constitution itself. And I was disappointed in that. I'm hoping I get a better answer today. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth.
Thank you, Speaker. You know, this is a tragic public health crisis, and it is impacting people deeply across this country. And I just want to say that my heart goes out to those people who have been impacted by this public health crisis. And I will say that our government remains fully committed to addressing this public health crisis, using every tool at our disposal to save lives and keep communities safe. And we have taken unprecedented action since 2017, action that's been informed by evidence and the experiences of those who have been most affected. And it's clear There is no one-size-fits-all approach. We are committed to a comprehensive, collaborative, and evidence-based substance policy approach, which includes prevention, enforcement, treatment, and, yes, harm reduction. And Speaker, too often, ideological approaches have gotten in the way of real progress, which inhibits the science. The toxic drug and overdose crisis is a public health issue. It is not a criminal justice issue. We do recognize that public safety must be maintained while we use a public health approach to address this crisis. And let's be clear, BC asked for this pilot project, and we granted their amendment request to make sure law enforcement has additional tools to address the public safety issues while we continue to take a public health approach to addressing the toxic drug and overdose crisis. We all want the same thing, for people and communities to be safe and secure, and for health care to be available to those who need it. We will continue to work with BC and to listen to concerns raised by all partners to make sure this exemption works seamlessly within the province's broader public health approach. Speaker, law enforcement leaders in Canada support a public health approach. They know we can't arrest our way out of this health crisis. British Columbia's exemption continues to be supported by rigorous monitoring and third-party evaluation to gather evidence and data on its impacts and outcomes, and to identify effective mitigation measures for any unintended consequences. And so I'll just repeat, we are committed to a comprehensive approach that protects public health and maintains public safety. And we'll keep working with provinces and territories, municipalities, organizations, other partners, everyone involved to make sure we bring this public health crisis to an end.
Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
Good, thank you. Yes, we often hear Liberals say, well, you know, we're taking a science-based approach. Well, you know, the science is in, it's not working. Over 2,500 toxic deaths last year. This is during the pilot project. It was worse than the year before. This is going in the wrong direction. Now, we've known about this for quite a long time. The provincial government introduced this legislation a while ago, and unfortunately it failed at the BC Supreme Court level. But we also have evidence coming out of Oregon, for example, which has also rolled back their harm reduction, their safe supply strategies because they are not working. So we are really looking for creative solutions that will protect people's rights, their charter rights as well, I might add. Thank you.
Parliamentary Secretary.
As I said, Speaker, no one measure will work. We must do everything we can to prevent overdoses and save lives and help people find their way to appropriate treatment and pathways to recovery, while at the same time keeping our communities safe and addressing drug trafficking and organized crime. Our government is focused on supporting a full range of services and supports to address the diverse needs of people who use drugs, as well as enforcement efforts to protect our communities. We're in the midst of a crisis. This is not a time to be pitting harm reduction against treatment. The truth is we need them both, and we need more than that. And the evidence clearly demonstrates this. So going forward, we will continue to work hand in hand with all of our partners, including provinces, law enforcement, Indigenous communities, people with lived and living experience, and municipalities across this country every step of the way. And we will adapt and adjust our approach to reflect the evidence and what is actually working on the ground.